Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Hope you're well. My name's Alex, and this is Slumber Time Podcast. Welcome back to my ranking of Shakespeare. This week is the Comedies. I have watched 16 different plays in the last couple weeks, and wow, have I had to do a lot. Luckily, I gave myself just enough time to do so. I just finished right before recording this, so I am only looking at the first folio. I'll not be discussing Pericles or Two Noble Kinsmen, mostly due to time, and I won't be touching the Apocrypha either. Also, unless I get some clear inspiration in the future, I likely won't be ranking the histories. Richard III is likely number one anyway, although there's a David Tennant Richard II online I'm interested in watching. Anyway, I've watched only one version of each, and they're all openly available. Most were from the Royal Shakespeare Company, but if not, I'll tell you which version I watched. For the RSC, you can find just over half of the comedies on marquee.tv, not a sponsor. They have a 2-week free trial, so you can see any of the long list of plays, ballets, operas, and so on, and you can stop your subscription whenever you feel fit. I'll put the URL in the description below. I also need to add my criteria for how I ranked these, which are 1, how much I enjoyed the performance, 2, how well done the story is, and 3, how easy it is to understand. All 3 will go into how I rank each of them, so if the writing is bad but the performance is good, or vice versa, you may see differences in the list. Consider this a ranking of performances instead of just the plays. Also, since some of the productions weren't available for the RSC, some versions I did see biased the outcome, so be aware of that. So for number 16, my least favorite Shakespearean play of the ones I saw was Taming of the Shrew. This is the only bad RSC performance, I think. Honestly, this is the play that actively made me angry. I'm not sure if it was mostly how it was performed or how it was written. A friend of mine claims it's one of his favorite Shakespearean comedies, so I'm guessing it's the former. But it was done so poorly, it overshadowed the writing, so I really couldn't find much good in it. There's also a debate on whether this play is misogynistic or not. One side says that it's all about bending women to men's will. That is the surface level understanding of this, but some scholars believe that this is similar to a morality play, in that it shows what should not be done. The characters are so unlikable that you don't want to be like them. My issue is that this version swaps the genders of all the characters. To me, doing so muddled that meaning. I can see that they're trying to satirize the play in order to show that the treatment of women in the play is outrageous. That, as well as acting the role so seriously and getting rid of the play within a play element, makes it seem like they missed the deeper meaning. So with every single character in this being so unlikable, I had so much difficulty getting through this. The treatment comes across as cruel, and I feel like I've watched the torture of Catherine. They either went too far or not far enough and ended up losing what comedic elements can be added to it. The only thing I can say is that the costumes and movement in them were very impressive. It must have taken a long time to get used to moving in those types of dresses, and I appreciate how it looked on stage. Avoid this version at least. There seem to be better ones, but I have no interest in checking any of them out for a while now. Now, unfortunately, I have to put all but one of the BBC productions. They are available on Amazon Prime, but I can't recommend this series for the most part. Often they're acted well, in that they seem to fit the characters they're meant to portray. However, I find that they're lacking in understanding of the words or need some young blood to give it a fresher perspective. At the very least, they tend to have no life in them and unfortunately are quite dreadful to sit through. I'm not sure that anybody is actually having fun outside of a select few. It's as if you tried to do Chekhov seriously. I got so tired of them that I had to turn elsewhere for one that wasn't an RSC production. So for number 15, we have All's Well That Ends Well. This one is about a woman who saves the king's life, and he grants her the ability to choose whichever husband she wants. So she chooses a man who doesn't love her. The play is mostly about him trying to cheat on her and her trying to trick him into being with her. For the most part, I haven't heard many people say they love this play in the first place, so it might not be well liked just across the board, but it's a dry one. I'm not sure why the BBC has such a difficulty with having fun, but the clown, for example, is the most boring of them all. To have a boring clown is a terrible sin against Shakespeare's works. At least in this one, the trickery did not feel cruel like with The Taming of the Shrew. Moreover, it's also not the easiest play to follow. The thing about the BBC version is that it tries to have the words stand alone, but it doesn't translate as easily these days, so I missed a few plot points that I had to look up as well. Alright, number 14, Troilus and Cressida. Do you like sitting in on war meetings? If you do, you'll really like this one. This play is as if you put the Greeks and Shakespeare together and form one play, which very well may have been the general idea. You get to see the perspective of Troy, as well as a bit of the Grecian one. As someone who likes Greek tragedies and has even played Menelaus, I can enjoy the story for what it is, but those are two difficult genres of literature that did not combine well here. I'm going to be honest as well and say that I made a mistake with this one. I should have placed this in the tragedy category, because things do not go so well, to say the least. Just place it on the number 11 spot below Antony and Cleopatra. There were a few good points, though, like with Pandarus, who was sometimes funny with his bawdy comments. The first half is alright, but I just left the second half on in the background for the most part while doing other things. The other thing about this is that it was extremely difficult to understand, and it seems to have more long monologues in it than any other Shakespearean play. It drags on and on at times, and for 3-hour performance, you cannot be doing that. On top of some terrible overacting with Cressida and the writing being one of Shakespeare's weakest, I can't place this above the number 14 spot. Number 13, though, is The Comedy of Errors. I can already tell this list is probably going to be different than anybody else's. For this version, I watched the 1983 BBC production on Amazon Prime, which is Shakespeare's shortest play, which clocked in at 1 hour and 45 minutes. But it felt nearly twice as long. Perhaps I'm not as familiar with the Roman and Greek theater as I should be, but this one feels completely plagiarized. There are very few differences between this and the Menachmi, and the only big one is the story with the father who's alive for some reason. Although that has no impact on the plot, the main issue I have is that it dragged on and on with almost no comedy to liven it up. It was well acted, I feel, but they just could not save it with the direction they were given. At least in this one, they seem like they're having a little bit of fun. At least Dromio is. If every scene didn't feel the same, meaning we know there's going to be a misunderstanding and can guess what will happen next, it might have gone by faster. There's also a glaring plot hole in this, and it's that one brother was coming to the town to look for his missing brother. That never once was used in the play, and it makes it even less believable that he wouldn't guess there are some very unlikely errors happening with that in the front of his mind. I know at least that in a few years' time I'll have forgotten this one, and I'll still remember how much I enjoyed the original Roman play. Feel free to skip this one. Alright, 12. Cymbeline. What a mess this play is. This one was done by the RSC, but for me, this was a bit hard to understand and dragged in many parts. There are so many plots in this to keep track of as well, and I can imagine some performances being insufferable if done wrong. The plot to this one is 2 of the king's sons were stolen at birth, who you don't meet until halfway through the play, and there's one daughter left. Her partner in this bets that nobody can woo her because he believes her to be faithful, but the friend lies and says that he did woo her and proved it by describing her body, which he saw when he broke into her room while she was sleeping. Imagine a plot like Othello for the first half. It feels so much like a tragedy, and I was so ready to write this play off as the worst until the second half. This feels like the opposite of Troilus and Cressida, in that the second half is where the play gets really interesting and a bit funny. If you're able to make it through the first half, I think you'll really enjoy the second. For me, it's a guilty pleasure. I wouldn't mind watching it again for sure, and just read the summary of the first part. It was exciting, funny, nerve-wracking, and entertaining. There's certainly a lot of loose ends that need to be taken care of at the end, and it makes it a bit too much at times, but I can forgive that part. For having several fantastic parts in the second half, I can still recommend it. Just be ready for a rough beginning. Number 11, The Merry Wives of Windsor. So here's where the plays start to get better. This is the version I saw by the Texas Shakespeare Festival because I was just so tired of the BBC versions. You can find it on YouTube. Overall, I chuckled a bit throughout most of it, and there were some decent gags, especially whenever the character Simple is on stage. It's also great when the wives play their pranks on John Falstaff. Everyone seems to be having fun, even if it's a bit over the top for me. I'm not always interested in the farces, but it does a decent job. My main issue is that I had such a difficulty following who's who. There's so many characters on stage at a time, especially in the beginning. I had no idea what was going on, and I didn't know until halfway through, thanks to a summary on Wikipedia, that there were even 3 suitors for Anne Page. I only got that from them in the last act. If you're going to watch this one, read the summary, follow the play with the script. If not, I think you'll be totally lost. Coming in at number 10, we have The Winter's Tale. This is the only BBC production that I genuinely enjoyed for the most part. Hermione has great chemistry with Leontes and Polixenes, and there's a great child actor. It feels like the child talks like a kid would at the time, and the kid captures it pretty well. Unfortunately, they're only in the first half of the play. The story to this one is one that Shakespeare loves a bit too much, in my opinion. It's about a man who thinks his wife's cheating. Yeah, haven't heard that one before. If I counted correctly, that happens in 6 of the comedies, but at least in this one, he comes to the conclusion himself. I definitely don't care much for those who lie about it unless you're Iago. There's also a time skip halfway through, and that's sort of when things start going downhill for me. One of the scenes right after that is about 40 minutes long, and it could have been cut down a bit more in the original script, I think. But my biggest complaint is in regards to the ending. The king goes off stage, and then some random lords come in and explain everything that happened while the king was off stage. They explain that the king learned his daughter has returned. We don't get to see the reunion or his reaction whatsoever. I find that to be the most important parts of these types of stories, and they skip over it completely. Great first half, with a decent second half, and an extremely aggravating ending. This is one of the best examples of show, don't tell. Number 9, The Tempest. Overall, this play was fine. Yeah, that may not be so interesting to say, but that's basically how I see The Tempest. Let me say the good parts first. So I watched the Savage Rose Classical Theater Company's version on YouTube, although there is an RSC version online as well. The RSC version may be better, but I hadn't found it yet. In their version, Ariel is very well done. I loved his singing, and whenever he was on stage, I was captivated. Also, the comedic relief is often quite funny. For individual scenes, I can recommend this play. However, my main issue is, what's the point? It's not about revenge. It seems like Prospero is just trying to get back to his old life? Maybe? The love story in this takes a backseat to the plotting that Prospero does, and she fell in love with literally the 3rd man she ever met. But it all feels anticlimactic when he meets back up with his brother who got him banished. Basically, all is forgiven, and it feels very underwhelming. You would think that the brother at least would have some negative reaction to running into the man he got banished. You're just going to bring him back and return things back to normal? I don't think so. Yeah, for a pretty good story with a not so great ending, it deserves the number 9 spot. Coming in at number 8, I put Measure for Measure. I can definitely see why this one is a problem play. The tone throughout this is a bit odd, but I will say that the drama is pretty decent. It's about a man, Claudio, who got his very soon-to-be wife pregnant and is jailed because it happened just before they were officially married. The Duke leaves at this time to see how Angelo would rule the area, but Angelo decides to be extremely strict, and sentences Claudio to death. The rest is about how his sister Isabella tries to get him set free and how the Duke, dressed as a friar, tries to interfere to save Claudio's life without revealing himself. It had some funny moments throughout and keeps your interest throughout most of it too. The main issue is with the ending at times. Claudio survives, and then the Duke tells Isabella that she will marry him even though she never consents to it. In actuality, she was living at a nunnery and training to be a nun. It all feels like a bittersweet ending and a bit like a tragic ending for Isabella, even though it's supposed to be a quote unquote happy ending. However, the tone for this is not problematic for me. I find this to be realistic, and I find that the ending isn't completely happy, but that's alright. There's a gray area that I quite appreciate. Also, it has a very interesting villain that's just a fun slime ball. Do give this one a watch. Number 7. Two Gentlemen of Verona. This one is a story about two friends both trying to get the same girl, but one is already in a relationship with another woman. This one certainly has a few comedic moments, like whenever Speed and Launce are on stage. It's a good play for dog lovers as well. I rank this one above The Tempest and Measure for Measure for a few reasons. This one has an interesting drama with a lot more comedic elements added to it. The two friends have good chemistry, and I'll remember laughing at this one a bit more. I feel it's also just better written from the beginning to near the end. One of the best points is that I really liked Sylvia as a character. She seems to be one of the strongest female leads in all of the comedies, and she isn't easily persuaded by any of the male characters, and it's certainly a breath of fresh air to me. The ending to this one is handled well enough. I do feel Proteus as a character who should have gotten a bit more of a punishment, and I would have liked to see Valentine get angrier with Proteus since he was about to rape Sylvia. Nearly drowning him was a good addition, though. All in all, it was pretty enjoyable. Number 6. Midsummer Night's Dream. Boy, did I choose the wrong version of this to watch. I know there have to be better versions, but the one I could find on short notice was the 1999 version with Christian Bale and Kevin Kline. There were certainly some good parts in this one. I enjoyed Bottom, and Puck was sometimes enjoyable to watch. I certainly enjoyed the play at the end a bit. I can see how this can be really funny, especially at the end. From what I've heard, this play is generally seen as a gateway play into Shakespeare's comedies. And, done with better direction, I can see it a bit higher on my list, hence the asterisk. However, I find myself not caring whatsoever in regards to the four lovers. Their story was almost nothing to me, and it was just the most standard love triangle, or square in this instance. I'm also not usually a big fan of fantasy, but those are the best parts of the play. If it were just about the lovers, I doubt anybody would ever mention this one. However, I will definitely say it's a great play to read in class. The writing is quite poetic and very beautiful at times, and it's easy enough to understand, which are the only reasons I'm placing it so high. But it makes me wonder, is this Shakespeare's most overrated comedy? I don't know, but I can't possibly rank it any higher. Just left a bad taste in my mouth. What a pity. Alright, number 5. As You Like It. For me, this was just a lovely story. Instead of the RSC version, I ended up watching Laurence Olivier's version. I heard so much about his performances of Shakespeare, and honestly, I wasn't terribly impressed by it at first. But the more I think on it, the more I enjoy it. It may be that this was from the 1930s, but the best way I can explain it is that it feels very vanilla. There's nothing wrong with vanilla, but there are certainly other flavors I enjoy more. The story to this one is that a girl named Rosalind is banished, so she dresses like a boy and she ends up teaching the man she loves how to love a woman. They eventually get married. That's it. The comedy comes mostly from the clown, who has some pretty good lines, but his story doesn't really go anywhere. I don't have much negative to say about this play. It's just very simple. It's still charming and quaint. I enjoy Rosalind in this version, and she comes across as a very likable character. The conflict, however, in this is so small that it doesn't really feel like a lot can be lost. If you want a play that's simple and just a feel-good play, this is a good choice. If you want some more depth like me, there are some better ones. Although, for something safe that doesn't take a lot of risks, this one does just fine. Number 4, Love's Labour's Lost. This was a surprisingly funny play. Maybe it's just because the cast is nearly the same as in Much Ado About Nothing, but I had a lot of fun with this group. You also have the man playing Armado, the same as the one who played Sir Toby Belch in Twelfth Night, as well as Don Pedro in Much Ado. And you also have Costard, played by the same guy as Dogberry in Much Ado. Basically, at least 10 of the actors are the same between the two plays, and the parallels are quite fun to find along the way. It's a good depth they were able to give this play, especially since the general story is not so special. 4 guys say they won't talk to any woman for 3 years, but 4 women show up and they fall in love. By the time the intermission comes, they've already finished Act 4 with 1 act remaining, which makes it feel like it went by in a flash. By adding some fun gags, they went above and beyond the normal words and made it even funnier than you'd imagine the script would be. I really loved this play. The only criticism for this one is that the play is a bit too simple with the love story, and I wish they hadn't had 4 couples to keep track of. Basically, only 2 mattered, so you really could have ignored the rest. As for the ending, I was not expecting that. I won't spoil it, but the ending was a bit emotional, and it was completely different than any of Shakespeare's other comedies. I have to give it its props. Definitely do check it out if you get the chance. Just maybe watch Much Ado About Nothing first. Number 3, The Merchant of Venice. Wow, there is so much to talk about with this RSC play. I loved it so much. The romance, the conflict, the comedy, all of it works here for me. I loved seeing the different suitors of Portia, who's a strong female lead. I love that she is the one who saves Antonio. This is also the perfect casting for Shylock as well. Don't go into this one expecting to laugh a ton, though. This one is best for how dramatic it is. Still, there are some funny moments throughout that balance it so well. If I had any issues, it would be I have no idea why this performance they had Antonio and Bassanio kiss, especially in front of Portia. It didn't really affect anything, and outside of that, there were a lot of fun choices. A point I have to address as well is this play is one that's generally seen as being anti-Semitic, similar to how The Taming of the Shrew is seen as misogynistic. However, Shylock really stressed how he has been done wrong by others due to that prejudice. Shylock did almost nothing wrong. Like, Antonio broke the contract, and so Shylock deserves the payment. I personally see this play as a tragedy for Shylock. He loses everything after he gets screwed out of his rewards from the court. Instead of just going separate ways, he loses all that he owns. The way this performance handled the main discrimination really impressed me, and I felt myself feeling for Shylock throughout most of the ending. I want to discuss this play in more detail with other people to get their thoughts on it too, so I have to put this in the number 3 spot. Number 2, Twelfth Night. This was the first ever Shakespearean comedy I ever acted in, and it was a great first one to be in, and the RSC version did even better than we could have hoped. I wish I were as good at being a fool as this Sir Andrew. It's a love story, it's funny, it's even a bit of a musical with some of the fun capers. It breathes life into an already great script, and I enjoyed myself throughout pretty much all of it. On top of all of that, it's still a relevant take on sexuality and relationships. It doesn't even go too far with the misunderstandings or love triangles. It's enough to get the point across, and it has fun with it while not beating you over the head. It's everything that I wish Comedy of Errors was. Be ready to hum some of the songs from this and have fun with Sir Toby and Sir Andrew and their escapades. The closest thing to a bad guy would be either Sir Toby or Mariah, and they are only seen that way because their jokes go a bit too far and cause even more hijinks that the audience gets to enjoy. It's one of the Bard's best and still holds up today. Now, the number 1 best performance and best Shakespearean play, in my opinion, is Love's Labour's 1, also known as Much Ado About Nothing. What a fantastic play! I have never laughed so hard at a Shakespearean play as I have Much Ado About Nothing. The RSC outdid themselves with this one and made what can feel like a bunch of bickering into a refreshing take on all of Shakespeare. If you're a lover of sarcasm and witty lines that are pretty easy to understand, I highly recommend this one. When Benedict learns that Beatrice supposedly loves him, I couldn't stop laughing. Edward Bennett is perfect in this role, and it's great to see the parallels with this and Love's Labour's Lost. They even went above and beyond what the play called for and added their own takes on the meaning and their own gags to make things even funnier. It all hit for me. And what's more is this is the only play I watched twice when going through these. It was the first comedy I saw from the list, and it was also one I had to see again in order to get myself through some of the other plays. With it being just under 2.5 hours, and most of it spent on a great love story and a ton of sarcasm, I loved it. The only criticism is with the writing of Don John and having Claudio believe that Hero was cheating. It feels like Othello, but watered down again. But that part I felt was quite short, and it led to a twist on the usual ending that misunderstanding can have. I can forgive that, though, since it allows for us to enjoy seeing Dogberry, this play's clown, who has his own charm that he adds. I can't praise this one enough, so please do check it out whenever you can. This is absolutely Shakespeare's best play in my mind. Alright, that's my ranking based on the performances I've seen. Are any of the performances I saw really bad ones in your mind? Are there better ones that would help the ranking? Or do I just have a very strange opinion? Let me know your favorite comedy by Shakespeare and why. Again, thank you for joining me. Check out the RSC productions on marquee.tv, and just remember, we're here and we're listening.